So I would like to welcome you all this evening. I'm Jamaica Jones. I am one of the program coordinators here at the University of Louisville Women's Center, and I serve as advisor to our Women for Women Student Board. And we want to welcome you not only virtually to the University of Louisville, but to our 11th annual and first virtual Human Trafficking Awareness Conference hosted by the Women's Center and Women for Women Student Board. This year is a little different, as we had to go virtual like most programs have this past year. But by doing so, we have been able to have people joining us from 11 states, 2 countries, and here in Kentucky, 40 cities and towns. If you are joining us from Kentucky, put a heart emoji in the chat or do a heart reaction. And if you're joining us from another state or even country, please put a thumbs up in the chat or a reaction. We are so happy to have you join us this evening. To get the conference going, I would like to invite the president of Women for Women Student Board, Kendra Stratford. Kendra, Grace, and Beverly will be our student MCs this evening. Kendra, the floor is yours.
Hello. The inauguration of the Human Trafficking Awareness Conference began in 2010 to raise awareness of human trafficking, to educate students in the community about the complex issue, and to encourage you to take action to prevent it. The focus of this year's conference will feature local anti-human trafficking efforts, what we can do as a community, and the impact of COVID on these efforts as it happens right here in our community. To ensure an engaging and smooth program for all, we ask that you keep your cameras off during the program. Your mic will be muted. Make sure you show some love for our speakers and volunteers throughout the program. We want you to actively engage with us, so please use the chat for any questions, comments, and reactions throughout. But please keep it respectful, as there are survivors who are joining us tonight. There will be difficult subject matter mentioned tonight, so if it gets a little hard for you, please take the time to take care of yourself, even if you must hop off. The program will be recorded and posted at the end of the week. There will be a Q&A at the end of the program where you have the chance to ask a question by typing it in the chat. This will also include questions that were already submitted during the registration. We will ask everyone to turn their cameras on for a group photo at the end. Please be patient with us as we make our way through.
Survivors that attend our conference have reported a sense of gratitude to the people who would take the time to listen and learn about such an important issue, something that continues to be difficult for survivors to relive as they share. It is my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Beagle, a powerful survivor who will be sharing her story. Jennifer is a survivor of sex trafficking with the story of hope. She is now an ordained minister and the mother of 3, including 2 children. She adopted from including 2 children she adopted from foster care. In 2017, Jen received the prestigious Director's Community Leadership Award directly from the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Before moving to Kentucky, she founded and directed a nonprofit called House of Hope in Florida. The organization runs a 14-bed recovery program for men and women, and the home is still thriving today. She has an ordination of ministry from the Global University and Kentucky School of Ministry. At Safe Passage, Jen is working directly with youth survivors to provide support, mentorship, and advocacy. As the Director of Family Support Services, Jen oversees the growing services to trafficked youth and their guardians. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer.
Hello, beautiful people. Let me just pull my camera up a little. Okay, great. Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I am so grateful to be here to tell my story. It's not an easy story to listen to, though through the years it's gotten a little easier for me to tell. So I just want to reiterate, if there is anything that's too difficult for you to handle as a survivor, you are so welcome to step off of here. I'm going to be telling my story for about 15 minutes, and then you can jump back on, I'm sure. So if you don't mind starting with that first slide where I was super, super little and really, really cute. I don't know what happened to me. That's the one. So I was raised in what would be considered a typical dysfunctional family, in that I lived way out in the woods. I'm the baby of 7. My father was a severe alcoholic, and my mother was a pretty promiscuous lady, and she had boyfriends in and out of our life. The older siblings started moving away, and then it was just myself and my next oldest sibling, 2 of the 7 still at home. In that, we were beat every day. We watched my father do some of the most unspeakable things to my mother because he was super angry about my mom and her affairs. And he was an alcoholic, so he wasn't the husband that he was supposed to be. So we used to go back and forth to my grandmother's house, and in that, I had an uncle. His name was Uncle Quincy. Uncle Quincy liked me. I was always his favorite niece. He was my mom's brother. And then one day I found my Uncle Quincy touching me in ways that no man should be touching a child. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it was not right. I got really scared. He could tell that I was scared, so he started bribing me with candy and $1. And this is, over 40 years ago. So $1 was a lot of money to a 7-year-old child. I took those dollars, and he continued to bribe me and continued to have his way with me. I did not have that approachable family, so I started acting out. I thought there was something wrong with me, and there was. It started to plant seeds inside of me that this type of behavior was normal. In that, I was trying to find some identity in my life and in my home, which was not happening. I started acting out more and more. I would take my dad's beer and I would start drinking them. And everyone would say, look at little Jenny, she's so cute, she's tipping the beer. Well, there's nothing really cute about a 9-year-old tipping beers, drinking your beer. But that started developing inside of me the addiction side of trafficking that we so commonly know today. Well, by the time I'm 11 years old, I ended up in and out of the system, in and out of courthouses, and just really acting out, really tired of what was going on at home with all the physical abuse. My dad would rape my mom in front of us, hold guns to her head, with my uncle molesting me, becoming that alcoholic. I started finding the wrong crowd, and it was pretty easy to get inside of that wrong crowd. When I was 13 and 14 years old, I was in and out of the courts, in and out of what would become HRS, and I would get in fights, get in a lot of trouble. I ended up in foster homes. My first foster home that I went in really did a number on me. My foster mom was a pill addict. She was addicted to uppers. She was addicted to speed, and we would steal them from her. And my foster dad was a sex addict, and I found him molesting me in the middle of the night as well. And he would bribe me also not to tell anyone, and I was so pretty, and he wanted me. And those were the things that I wanted to hear my whole life. I was 13, 14 years old at the time, and he was probably 50 to 55. So this is not okay. This is not behavior that a foster parent should be obviously doing toward a child. Anybody should be doing toward a child. So I ran away from that, went back to my mom, just in and out of the system. By the time I'm 19 years old, I get married to a man that was 38 years old, twice my age, and I am pregnant. I knew this man for 1 month, married him. 1 month later, I'm pregnant at 19, and I had my son, who is called Christopher, and you see him there in that slide. That was the best thing that I could come to a conclusion of. Finally, someone's going to love me, and I can give back and get back what I've so longed for. No, I did not know how to be a mother. I had never had that example to me. It didn't take long. that I was going back to my ways of drinking and drugging and sleeping around. So my husband divorced me, and I got married to a second husband at 21 years old who was much my style. He was an alcoholic, he was a drug addict, he was very abusive, just like my home life growing up, so it was very familiar to me. In that marriage, his sister was a crack cocaine addict, and she said to me, "Hey, Jen, you want to try this?" And I said, sure. I had already done everything under the sun anyway. So I tried it. It didn't really do anything for me. I was already drunk as well, so I passed out. But I woke up the next morning, and she asked if I wanted to try it again. And I said yes. So I did. And I was hooked. I needed more instantly. In that was the first time that I can visually say in my mind that I was actually trafficked, even though at the time, this is 19 years ago. Well, this is 29 years ago. So I didn't know what trafficking was, but she said, okay, so we're going to go to his house and you just flirt with him and tell him all kind of sweet nothings and he'll give us what we want. So we do that, and he did. And then we do it a second time, and he did. And I thought, I've got this guy eaten out of the palm of my hand. Let's go back a third time. Well, they had pre-planned this encounter. They knew that I was a stubborn thing, and that it would take me getting completely hooked on that drug for me to do what would come next. So the third time that we went back to his trailer was an old rundown trailer with no running water, no electricity, a scruffy old man with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and 3 teeth. And he says, no, this time you're going to do what I want you to do. And I found myself in a position that I never, ever in my life thought I would come to. So the next thing in my life, if you'll go to slide 3, the next thing in my life, I found myself very much addicted to crack cocaine. I would make up lies with my husband, who was beating the pulp out of me every single day. We would fight. He would choke me out. He would do all kinds of things, just like my dad would with my mom. But I found myself as the one that was the crack addict. And I didn't understand why at the time. I had a lot of questions, but I look back and think, well, that probably saved my life with this marriage, because he divorced me as well. Now I'm 24 years old. I'm divorced twice. I sell my mobile home for $1,500 and say, I'm going to live homeless in the streets and become a crack addict. What I didn't know was the industry. So the very first day I was on the streets, I was scared to death. I was petrified. I'm walking in the streets of Gainesville, Florida, trying to get some drugs. And the word got around very quickly that there was a new girl on the streets, and she wasn't worn out. She wasn't completely weathered and gone. So pimps started tracking me down. It was like a scene out of Vegas. It was a large city. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have Craigslist. We didn't have all of those things at the tip of a finger. People actually approached you, and well, may the best man win. So Bobby was my pimp, who offered me more drugs than anyone, and I thought he was going to be my boyfriend. He told me I was really pretty and that he could love me very easily and that he could give me anything and everything I ever wanted. I didn't have to work the streets. I just had to love him and love him per his request. So I did for about a month. And I didn't realize what was happening was a survivor sex scenario. So Bobby, at the end of that month, he started beating me up and asking me where his money was. And I was confused. And I'm like, what money? Like, I haven't stolen anything from you. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's when he beat me up again and sent me to the streets. While I was in the streets of Gainesville, Florida, I accumulated a 3-page arrest record, and here are some of my mugshots. You can see the decline from the top corner going down to the bottom corner. I went from a normal 120-pound female to 80 pounds, rotten teeth, lice in my hair, beat up all the time, raggedy looking woman, but still Johns would pick me up left and right, and I would come home, and I was commissioned to make $1,000 a day. So in that $1,000 a day, I found myself through a lot of experiences on the streets, but I found myself in a closet, and I said, I cannot live this way anymore. One of my traffickers was on the other side of the door, and he said, when you come out, I am going to kill you. You are dead. No reason to doubt him. He had tried many, many times before. So I just passed out in the closet. I've been to all kinds of meetings. I've been to jail. So I cried out to a God I didn't even know and said, if you're real, please help. Well, he did, and if you go to that next slide, I walked out of that closet a brand new person. If you don't mind going to slide 4, that would be great. I walked out of that closet and into a new life. It was pretty quickly that I found a purpose out of my pain. I ended up opening up 3 different nonprofits where I would go back into the streets and give back to the people that I had used drugs with, that I had prostituted with, that I had been trafficked with. And I ended up opening up a nonprofit called House of Hope for women. We had a 14-bed facility that was 6 months to 2 years. And through the cycle of almost 8 years, House of Hope was a fantastic organization where we could just be women. We could be raw with one another. We could be real. We could talk about our experiences, and we could learn how to heal from the complex trauma of trafficking, not just domestic violence, not just drug addiction, not just abuse in our families, but through hi, come on in. Also through that complex trauma. So for 8 years, I had that organization, but I also got reunited. Well, I'll say that for the last slide. If we could go to the next slide, that would be great. So through all of my experiences, I decided just to go all in, just to go ahead and become very transparent with my story, very transparent with people that I talked to, because I wanted people to understand the really big effects of trafficking. When I was on the streets, trafficking was not a thing. We were prostitutes, we were whores, we were hookers, we were everything but the victim. So I've really spent a lot of years just trying to educate society differently with the effects of that and what that really truly looks like. But not only can a person walk through these things for years, from 11 to 31 years old, I was an addict. From 7 years old to 31 years old, I was trafficked. So at 31, when I walked out of that closet and started House of Hope until this day, I've just made it my goal, my life, to educate people on the effects of trauma from trafficking, childhood, adverse experiences, all of those things. In that, I started working very closely with the system. I started working with law enforcement, probation officers, judges, all of the above. And a judge that used to put me in jail actually started sentencing women to my program. So that was pretty cool that he could see the difference and the change. And for years, we had a 100% success rate in the courts and in our community. If you'll go to the next slide, slide 6. I was recognized in 2017. I won, listen, y'all, I used to eat out of garbage cans. I slept on the ground hundreds of times. I have been trafficked thousands of times, thousands upon thousands of times. You know, so still have an 8th grade education. All of these things that I believed about myself that I would never amount to anything and that I could never accomplish any good. I believed that I was the problem. Every bit of what was going on was my fault, even through the childhood. I never understood that this was like trauma. So I won this award from the FBI, and the FBI called me and they said, Jennifer Beagle, and I said, yes. And they said, this is special agent so-and-so, and I said, I didn't do it. I know nothing. I'm good. Like, I have no details for you. But he said, no, we just want to let you know that we recognize your work, and you won an award over 66 counties throughout the state of Florida and South Georgia. And we're flying you to Washington, D.C. to receive this award. It's the Directors National Leadership Award. And I'm blown away. So I'm like, I used to eat out of garbage cans. I have an 8th grade education still. What do you mean you're flying me to DC to the Ed Hoover building and you're going to give me an award? Out of 360 million people in this nation, I win this award. And that just blows my mind at what can happen and how many people who are missing out because they don't believe they have any purpose and they can't change that pain around. So if you'll go to the next slide, this is my favorite slide of all. I ended up getting reunited with my biological son. I lost him at 4 years old. I never spoke to him again until he was 12. Never, not once, not ever. His father was from Kentucky, so he moved him up here when he was 4, and I was ripping and running that whole time and got reunited at 12. He's the guy in the back with like the red and blue plaid checkered shirt on. He's 30 now, and he is my absolute pride and joy. We are such best friends. We're super close. He asked me if I would move up here to Kentucky to be a part of him and his wife, and that is her in the back. And the 3 smallest children are my grandbabies. And then those other 2 children are my 2 adopted children. I was recognized by the system for my works in Florida, and they allowed me to adopt these 2 children out of Florida foster care. So I know it's a big story, and I know there's a lot to it. I would love to be able to tell you more and more because there's so much I can't tell you in 20 minutes. So my information will be at the end of this conference. I would love to connect with you and tell you more because there's just so much to say. So I'm so grateful to be able to tell my story then and now of what I do. And at the end of this, I'll tell you more of what I do. So thank you so much for letting me share.
Jennifer, thank you so much for coming here today, sharing your powerful story. On behalf of the committee, we want to thank you. You will hear from Jennifer later as she speaks more about safe passage. And before we proceed, I just wanted to give everyone a quick reminder to turn off your cameras if they're not already off so that everyone can see the presentations. Many of you submitted questions about what policies and legislation are combating human trafficking locally and nationally. Teena Halbig, Vice Chair of the United Nations Association USA Kentucky Division, will be sharing information about what human trafficking is and the current policies and legislation locally, nationally, and internationally. Teena Halbig has been active with human trafficking for dozens of years with the United Nations Association of the USA Kentucky Division, known as UNA USA, where she is the current vice chair after 6 years as president. Initially and today, awareness of human trafficking remains a priority, but prevention works have been added in recent years. She has served on national panels and convened a commission on the Status of Women panel in New York on CEDAW, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and led the fight to get the CEDAW Resolution 6 passed by the Kentucky House of Representatives. In 2018, Teena's human trafficking resolution was taken to the Dominican Republic by UNA USA and presented at the World Federation of UNAs, composed of 93 countries, where it passed. Her proposal was to have first and second tier countries with electronic and/or phone communications mirror what was done in the United States by Polaris Project and the US Department of Human Health and Services to create human trafficking hotline numbers and share data. Her resolution was adopted October 2018, and the Polaris Project soon sent a past 10-year employee to begin work to set up hotlines in 2 of those countries. She is also on the Louisville Metro Human Trafficking Task Force and the Kentucky Statewide Human Trafficking Task Force. Please join me in welcoming Teena Halbig.
Hello, everyone. Let me get my slide up here. I think the slides are loading. So some of the important human trafficking laws are here, and you can find those in the KRS, Kentucky Revised Statute 529.100. And sex trafficking is when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to cause a commercial sex act with an adult or minor, and proof of force, fraud, or coercion is not necessary for anyone under the age of 18. Labor trafficking is when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to cause an adult or minor to perform labor or services. And these services may be performed for no money, less than minimum wage, or to pay off a debt. So it was in 2007 when this first law, KRS 529.100, came to be. It was passed to make human trafficking a crime and granting rights to victims of human trafficking. Then in 2013, Kentucky passed the Human Trafficking Victims' Rights Act to strengthen penalties for traffickers and set up a safe harbor and pathway to services for child victims. This law created a robust legal structure to bring about justice in cases of human trafficking. It was amended so that proof of force, fraud, or coercion is not necessary for anyone under the age of 18. That was passed in the 2013 Kentucky General Assembly as House Bill 3. You can also look at Kentucky Revised Statute 620.030 as well as .040. Kentucky law requires, it mandates that if you have any suspicion whatsoever that a child is being trafficked for sex or labor, that you report that suspicion. If you see that it's an immediate danger situation, you can call 911, but do not attempt to assist that victim. You need to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline number that is available 24/7. A big tip is to put it in your cell phone now so you'll have it if you ever need it. And the number is 1-888-373-7888. Or there's the texting of 233-733 or Be Free. Or there is the live chat. All of these are 24/7. And there's no repercussions if you report something and it doesn't pan out to be true. If you notice a child is involved, you can call business hours Monday through Friday, the Cabinet for Health and Family Services at 1-877 Kentucky Safe 1. The federal legislation that's important is in 2015, ICE was enabled to investigate the production of any good reported to be the product of child or forced labor and ban those goods from entry into the United States. More recently, on January 8th, 2019, the President signed into law the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act of 2018 that has several provisions that improve the federal government's authorities to combat human trafficking. Frederick Douglass was an escaped slave who became a prominent activist, author, and public speaker. He became a leader in the abolitionist movement, which sought to end the practice of slavery before and during the Civil War. His work served as an inspiration to the civil rights movement of the 1960s and beyond. And more recently, the Trafficking Victims Protection Act that was originally passed in 2000 was amended by the end of the 115th Congress for the 9th time. If you want to know more about the Kentucky laws, you can look this year and see laws that are being proposed at www.legislature.ky.gov. If you want to leave a message for a legislator, you can call the Capitol operator at 1-800-372-7181. Some statistics for you that since 2007 to 19, Kentucky has had nearly 3,000 calls go into the Polaris hotline number. The total number of human trafficking cases were 701 with 896 victims, because sometimes the case includes more than one victim. And the most recent statistics that are available, the latest data, 400 in 2019, and the total cases were 136, and the reference is Polaris. You can go to www.polarisproject.com to get loads of information. Kentucky, unfortunately, is the 5th poorest state in the country. Eastern Kentucky, the 5th congressional district, continues to rank as one of the poorest areas in the United States. The deep intersectionality exists between the opioid abuse, poverty, and human trafficking. Caregivers or parents will trade their children to manage their addiction, and traffickers use drugs to control and manipulate their victims. Efforts are to decriminalize prostitution for such crimes. CDC, the Center for Disease Control, says that Kentucky has one of the highest opioid overdose death rates in the country between 2000 and 2016. Not only that, but Kentucky has the highest rate of child abuse in the United States. 95% due to neglect. 53% have caregivers that were there at risk for drug abuse. And 47% are with the risk of domestic violence. COVID has increased child and adult abuses since 2020, with in-home exposures and fewer ways to report. More internet, cybercrimes, Facebook, etc. are causing problems. In 2019, Polaris Project cited over 9,000 illicit massage businesses across the United States, where victims are forced into human trafficking, and these businesses are often organized into criminal networks and have revenues in excess of $2.5 billion. Some special observances and rankings, not only in countries, but in the United States. December the 2nd, 1949, the United Nations created the International Day for the Abolition of Slavery to suppress human trafficking and prostitution as a resolution. January the 11th is Human Trafficking Day, and January is the month of human trafficking. It was created in 2007 by the U.S. Senate to recognize human trafficking in the United States. July the 30th is United Nations World Day Against Trafficking in Person. And the ranking of countries, with Russia having the most trafficking, followed by China, Iran, Belarus, and Venezuela. The ranking in the United States that's current is 1,500 for California, Texas over 1,000, Florida around 900, and New York about 450. You will also encounter newer terminology for pornography, and pornography is involved in human trafficking. As now they want to call it child sexual abuse imagery or child sexual abuse material, which includes photographs, film, or other visual depictions of a child engaged in actual or simulated sexual activity. Some victims are branded with tattoos, and child forced marriage can also be used in human trafficking. Here you see the map that Polaris Project has, and you can look for Kentucky, and you can see that we have a lot of red, which is bad for trafficking. I'm going to give you a closer up photo where you can see traffic better and see more where it's located. And this Kentucky Spotlight by Polaris is the latest data that's available from January 1st, 2019 to the December to the end of the year. And in that span of time, 1 year, in Kentucky, 310 victims identified, 107 traffickers identified, and 28 businesses. There were 136 trafficking cases. 84 of these were sex, 28 were labor, and 8 were sex and labor, and 6 were not specified. The hotline calls that went in were 312 phone calls, 35 web forms, 8 emails, 39 texts, and the texts are increasing, and 6 web chats. So modern day slavery is a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry generating in the United States $150 billion each year. The Global Slavery Index estimated that roughly 40.3 million individuals are currently caught in modern slavery, with 71% of those being female and 1 in 4 being children. In the United States alone, there are 24.9 million. So who are the slaves today? Well, experts have calculated that roughly 13 million people were captured and sold as slaves in the 15th and 19th centuries. But today, an estimated 40.3 million people, more than 3 times the figure during the transatlantic slave trade, are living in some form of modern slavery, according to the latest figures. When we looked at 2016, drugs still remain the #1 criminal enterprise, and human trafficking moved up from 3rd place into 2nd, and guns moved down from 2nd place into 3rd place. The former Secretary of State, John Kerry, at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, said modern day slavery is a global industry which exploits tens of millions of people, generates revenue estimated at more than $150 billion annually per report by the International Labor Office, a UN agency. Secretary continued, he said, quote, "Those numbers should shock the conscience of every person into action. In the 21st century, we should never allow a price tag to be attached to the freedom of another human being. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 4, is freedom from slavery. CEDAW, Article 6, is to suppress human trafficking and prostitution. The UN Sustainable Development Goal number 5 is for empowerment of women and girls and gender equity, and also includes human trafficking." Thank you so much for your attention.
Teena, thank you for sharing this information with us and what we can do in these efforts. Next, we will hear from local organizations working on ending human trafficking, how Covet has impacted their efforts, and what we can do as a community. First, we will hear from Dr. Teresa Hayden, President and Board Chair of People Against the Trafficking of Humans Coalition of Kentucky. Teresa completed her doctorate in social work from the University of Louisville Kent School of Social Work. Along the road, she earned 2 master's degrees, social work, Kent School and Religious Education, Fordham University in New York City, and a bachelor's in psychology from Brochure University, Owensboro, Kentucky. She has taught courses in research methods, statistics, policy, and human trafficking. Teresa has presented on the topic of human trafficking at international, state, and local conferences. As the board chair of the nonprofit People Against Trafficking Humans Coalition of Kentucky, she is engaged with community awareness on the crime of human trafficking. Dr. Hayden is Professor Emeritus from the University of Louisville Department of Criminal Justice. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Teresa Hayden.
Hi, everyone. I hope my sound is okay. We're good. Welcome to another great Women-Centered Annual Conference. Let's see, guys. Can I move the next slide, please? You move the slides for me. Yeah, thank you. People Against Trafficking Humans Coalition of Kentucky is a nonprofit. We found our 501c3 in 2013, so we're still babies as a nonprofit. But our mission is to foster awareness of the realities of human trafficking and cultivate collaborative efforts with agencies and individuals who provide healing and hope to those affected by human trafficking. So as a nonprofit, we do not provide direct services. We work hard to educate and raise awareness on this issue. Next slide, please. This is our board. Lots of happy faces there. Lots of diversity. As you can see, there's a spot in the corner just for you. If you have an interest in joining us, please let me know. And I'd love to talk to you about that. We have a fantastic board, strong board of people in the community with a variety of strengths to support the work in our nonprofit. Next slide. As you've heard tonight, human trafficking is complex. It's comprised of many things. Sex, labor, happens many places. It's unbelievable, but it's an exploitation of other human beings. So we find it as a nonprofit, our work is to educate and to raise awareness. That's what we work hard with our programs. We are that's okay, go ahead. Go ahead, yeah. We're grounded in the federal legislation that was passed in 2000. The Victims Trafficking Violence Protection Act, or also known as the TVPA. This was the first federal legislation in the United States that made human trafficking a crime since the slave days after the Civil War. The office for that is to prosecute, protect, and prevent. We work closely with that in the sense of trying to collaborate with agencies, groups who prosecute, which would be the law enforcement, attorneys, investigators. Those who protect are also considered the first responders, many times the health protection, as well as law enforcement, and then prevent. That's the agencies that actually house and take care of and shelter. So our work is strongly grounded in these. 2000 was the first federal act. As Teena told you before, Kentucky passed our own state legislation in 2007. 2007 was very early for states to get into this legislation. Kentucky was a leader in passing legislation for this. It was in about 2015 that we still did not have all 50 states with their own legislation on it. Okay, next one, please. As you've heard tonight, this can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your gender. The common element is that somebody can be easily exploited or taken advantage of because of their circumstances in their life. And those circumstances can range from many things. It can, as Jennifer told us, her family situation. As we hear stories, we always see the vulnerabilities, poverty, many of the things that make it easy for a person or a child to be exploited. Okay, next slide, please. So how do we do our work? Well, every year in the first week of May, right before Derby, we hold a Derby vigil prayer service downtown Louisville. And this is a picture of one in 2020, I believe it was. It was 2019. We did not do our prayer vigil downtown last year because of COVID. That's one of the ways that COVID has totally affected us. But we did have a virtual prayer service, and we were able to carry on with it. I start out with the prayer service because this is how PATH came to be. The religious sisters in this community, the Sisters of Charity, the Ursuline Sisters, and the Dominican Sisters of Peace, were all gathering together to learn more about human trafficking and what could be done from it. And that group meeting evolved into the nonprofit that we are now. Okay, next slide, please. Another way that we raise awareness and educate is radio shows. We're happy to do media appearances, interviews at any point in time. You're looking here at Jamie Thompson, who was a prior staff member for us, and Summer Dickerson, and doing the radio show. Next slide, please. Just this January 2021 in Human Trafficking Month, and it kicked off on January 11th, Human Trafficking Day, we held a virtual queer summit, and we're addressing the exploitation through advocacy and allyship. That summit was in preparation for over a year. We had fantastic plan. It was good to go for March of 2020, and COVID again just crushed it down. It wasn't going to happen. Everything was put on hold, and through that year, our committee worked together to expand on this and figure out how to do it virtually. And as it turned out, it was a great experience. We had a first keynote presentation by Katie Roach, who is a trafficking survivor. And then we had a panel discussion at the end of the week to follow up with questions. And we had many people who are working with the LGBTQ community in Louisville that explains some of the vulnerabilities. We've come to know that the queer community are one of the highly vulnerable groups for being trafficked. A lot of times these are the many people that you will find as the runaway child, run away from home for many reasons, and they have no place to stay, and they're easily exploited. If anyone would like a copy of that recording, you can contact me. There's our website and the email through there, and I'll be happy to get that to you. Next slide, please. We also do workshops for professional social workers. We have presented to the field supervisors at 2 major universities in Kentucky. And we would love to do that for any other universities who might be listening and would like that, or for any type of professional group. We're happy to do that. We can provide insight as to what to look for, what are some of the signs, how can you help, what can you do in your work, so and that kind of thing. Next slide. We have done a training for nurses, the Galen nurses. We have we did a training. We are in the process of developing a medical training to inform one of the hospital systems in Kentucky. We have an EMS first responder on our board, and she's very knowledgeable with the whole medical piece, and we're reaching out and expanding with that, of people who are out there seeing what right there might encounter a case. Okay, next slide, please. We have also begun to do outreach with JCPS public school system and their faculty. Every time that Diana, our presenter, does a workshop with them, she gets at least 3 invitations to come to another aspect of the JCPS system. We're looking forward to doing outreach with that program within other public school systems throughout Kentucky. We are also working with Mercy Academy to work with the girls there, and one of our board members has worked very closely with the senior students to do a presentation for their service project within their own students. Then we're also going to be doing a workshop with physical education and health classes. Very excited about that, and we're totally available for any school systems that might have an interest in that. We do a Human Trafficking 101, what it is. We also do a digital safety program where we do outreach to youth, and then we also do for parents and guardians so they can know what's happening within their young people's lives. Next. Okay. As a licensed, well, not licensed, but as a credentialed social worker, I am supervising social work students who are in master's programs in Kentucky. One of our students is taking on a project collaborating with Catholic Charities and their Bakita initiative. They do the My Life, My Choice program. This student is from the Owensboro area, and she has done work with Girls Inc., a girls program in that area. So we're linking those together, and we will be making inroads there by doing some groups there. Love to get with your organizations and anything similar to that we can educate. My Life, My Choice, it can be a 6, 8, or 10-week session, and we cater it to the specific needs of the agencies. Okay, next slide, please. I have done some presentations in a banking conference. I have been asked multiple times to do that. Bankers are required to do a SARS report, Suspicious Activity Reporting System. As we know, this is a big money maker, and a lot of that money is cash. And people cannot always spend that money on a house, cars, and things, and they have to dispose of it and do some money laundering. So when I present at the conferences to the banking personnel, I talk about what human trafficking is, because many have not ever understood that, and they not familiar with the law of human trafficking, and then how that money is processed and how it could be coming through their bank. So that's another way that we do outreach with corporations and banks. Next slide, please. This is our now Governor Andy Beshear. At that time, he was still AG, and we had worked very closely with the Attorney General's office and the Human Trafficking Task Force in the state of Kentucky. Now Governor Beshear was doing a presentation with a group of people on raising awareness for that. We also are looking forward to working with the AG Cameron at this point in time. I know there's a high interest, and that office still is remaining very focused on human trafficking. Next slide, please. So another ways that COVID has impacted us, we've gone to Zoom meetings. Our board used to meet personally once a month, and when this first happened, I thought, I don't know how we're ever going to do a board meeting. And it's amazing how it's turned out, but we have adapted and making great headways, and we're progressing tremendously. We have a team building workshop set up for the end of March, where our board will do a virtual team building exercise. And it's going to be a very informative process. I'm looking forward to it and a little bit scared at the same time. We think, how can we get the same results that we would have in person? But so far, we've had a great year working through all of this and continuing on with our mission. So that's who we are, and that's what we do. And if you have an interest, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden. Next, we will hear from Amy Nace-Degonda, Assistant Program Director of the Bakita Empowerment Initiative with Catholic Charities of Louisville. Amy Nace-Degonda has her undergraduate degree in sociology from the University of Louisville. Amy has been working in social services since 2002. She works with the Bakita Empowerment Initiative at Catholic Charities of Louisville as the Assistant Program Director, where she provides educational workshops and trainings on human trafficking, assists in development of a statewide anti-trafficking coalition, and works directly with identified victims of human trafficking throughout Kentucky. She works closely with social service providers, healthcare workers, law enforcement, and others to ensure that human trafficking is being identified in our communities and that the survivors are provided with the resources they need to rebuild their lives. Amy has provided training on human trafficking to churches, social service agencies, government agencies, and volunteers. She has worked on the HOPE campaign, where she created materials for training professionals as well as volunteers. Amy is the co-chair of the statewide Human Trafficking Task Force, as well as the Nelson County Task Force. She is a member of the Southeastern Region Human Trafficking Advisory Board that was started by the HHS, which consists of representatives of 7 states in the Southeastern region. As part of her work with the Southeastern Region Advisory Board, Amy assisted in authoring the Guiding Principles, which has been published by HHS.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try to take control of these slides, and we'll see what happens. So as they mentioned, I work with the Bakita Empowerment Initiative at Catholic Charities of Louisville. At the Bakita Empowerment Initiative, we provide direct services to survivors of both labor and sex trafficking, male, female, and gender nonconforming, foreign-born, and domestic-born. We also provide services to those of all ages. However, we mostly provide direct services to adults. When we do work with minors, we will typically be providing more of the background supportive services and kind of helping agencies that are working with minors. We are a statewide program, so we are able to provide services throughout all of Kentucky. We operate from grants. So the majority of our funding comes from federal or state grants. We have some, which is more the private grants. And then sometimes, we are able to get money through donations, but it's typically going to be through those grants. So just kind of giving an overview of what we're going to talk about today is just kind of our core values and principles, kind of the response we have in the screening, the service needs that we have seen throughout our 13 years in service, and some of our prevention programs. Just to give an idea, we have served over 400 individuals, and 100 of our survivors have received that certification. This is actually older slides, so we probably have now served 500 plus people. We're actually in the process of updating our stats, and we've probably trained, I would say, upwards of 40,000 people. And then we have been able to assist in establishing and facilitating 12 local human trafficking task forces. So in our program, we have core principles that we do not deviate from. And these are principles that are incredibly important to us. And as you can see on these slides, they are client choice, empowerment, non-exploitative engagement with survivors, trauma-informed services, culturally appropriate services, and non-discriminatory access to services. Client choice is so incredibly important because we do not want to mimic in any way, shape, or form the trafficker. So from the moment somebody walks in the door, we're giving someone a choice. It may be, do you want to sit here or do you want to sit there? We're doing whatever we can to provide that empowerment, because at the end of the day, we are not the experts in that person's life, right? What we are there to do is to provide support. We are there to connect them to agencies and services that they may need, but it has to fit with what that person wants. So there will be times that we work with people that they may make choices that maybe I don't agree with, but I don't go home to their life. So we have to be able to make sure that we're meeting that person where they're at, and that the choices and the services that we are connecting are things that are going to work for them. We want to ensure that all of our engagement with survivors is non-exploitative. We do not want the survivors to feel like in any way, shape, or form that they have to do anything to be able to receive our services, right? It is always going to be that choice. So if you want to talk about our response, We respond in a myriad of different ways. We have a 24-hour crisis response through the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and that is where we receive, quite a number of our referrals, but we also receive referrals through other social service agencies, through schools, through community members. We've had those that we have worked with in the past that will let someone else know about us, and they will call us. So we can receive it from anywhere. Majority of the time, our staff is going to be available Monday through Friday during regular business hours. So, however, myself and the program director, we are the ones that get connected with the hotline. So if there is a call from the hotline after hours, myself or Marissa are going to respond to it, and then we will connect it to a case manager. We are also able to be on call with advance notice. So there have been times that law enforcement has informed us that they're going to be doing some sort of action, and they would like for the service provider to respond if needed. So that might be we're responding remotely. It may mean that we are in the room with law enforcement, but we're able to help us to meet those potential survivors immediately. We also will be able to help provide rapport and screening for other service agencies. So we, even though we are able to work with program participants for as long as they need, that's not always what, ends up happening. We might have a service provider that just really wants assistance with, like, how do I do this screening? Like, how do I identify what are going to be the best services for this program participant that they're serving? So we may provide that technical assistance for them and then do that screening and then connect them on to other services. And then we're going to do, we could coordinate services, and that can look like a myriad of different things like emergency housing, interpreters, giving food cards. It could be connecting to therapy, whatever it is that the program participant needs. And we really do try to anticipate the needs that, of program participants and future program participants, but every single person is an individual, right? So we're not going to be able to anticipate every single need. So a big part of our, work is also, making collaborations within the community, because, our motto is that not one agency can provide all the needs for one person. So you want to ensure that you have that collaboration so that when you are working with someone and they identify a need that, we're not able to fill, that we can connect them to those services. However, we can't anticipate the majority, or some of the needs, but here are the majority, like what we will typically see in a case when we, are working with them. When we do a screening, we will identify if they meet the federal definition of trafficking. If a person, when we do a screening, does not meet the federal definition, what we want to ensure is that that person leaves with a resource, whether that is we help connect them to that resource that day, or if they're not ready for a resource, that they leave with a resource in hand, whether it be a phone number or a name. Because just because it's not trafficking doesn't mean that we don't want to help them get connected to what it is they need. If we do identify that it is trafficking, then what we're doing is like a immediate needs assessment. What is that immediate need that person has? Sometimes that's safety, sometimes that's food, sometimes that's just getting connected with legal services. So we're going to meet that need immediately. Then we sit down and we do kind of what's a needs assessment with the person and kind of identifying what is that longer term longer term goals and objectives they want to work towards. And that's when we really look at, is our program the most appropriate? Right? Like, what if we are working with somebody and we identify that program participant really, is wanting to have more like residential type services? Well, we don't provide residential services, so we are going to work to connect that person with it. However, if it is, our program seems appropriate and it's something that the participant wants to, continue working with us on, we are looking into it. And what we are seeing a lot of, especially now, is housing and food are really big. And then, mental health assistance, and then that legal assistance. I know we've been kind of talking throughout the program about, what we're seeing with COVID. And I will tell you that whereas we haven't really we've seen like a little bit of an increase in the referrals that we've been getting. What we have noticed is that the program participants we were working with when COVID, kind of hit, was that they really needed, instead of more of that case management, they needed more of that emotional support. You know, it threw everybody for a loop. We had to change the way that we did services. We weren't able to meet in person for quite a while. So, you know, we had to figure that out and figure out how to meet that need. And what we were finding too was that, you know, a lot of the times the services that the program participants were getting out in the community might have closed. They might have not been able to like provide those services any longer. So we were having to extend the amount of time that we provided financial assistance and case management because of all that was going on with COVID. And we actually, honestly, it wasn't until about October or November that we, you know, started recognizing that the services kind of were looking more like case management again, and not so much of that emotional support. And we started seeing the program participants like making more progress toward their goals, because a lot of times, you know, during especially, you know, we were all kind of shut down, things kind of ran stagnant, and it was kind of just making sure that they were getting that emotional support. So a lot of the common services are, you know, the things that you see here on your screen. We do a lot of screening for human trafficking. The big bulk of the thing we do is the case management. Catholic Charities, we're able, you know, to provide immigration legal services in-house, but we also do contract out with immigration attorneys. We're able to provide ESL and interpreter services. We connect with job development services, transportation assistance, you know, really anything that a program participant identifies that they need, we are going to try to meet it. We have a lot of services that we are able to provide through Catholic Charities. You know, we're really lucky in that way that, you know, Catholic Charities really has, you know, numerous programs within it. So we're able to connect. But, you know, we also coordinate with a lot of other service providers, you know, within the community. And we really have to look at building up, you know, not only the community in Louisville, but we have to look at the community, you know, all throughout Kentucky. We actually are getting ready to expand our office into Owensboro. So I was just working on providing an entire like services list, you know, for the new case manager there of all of Western Kentucky, because we want to make sure that when the case manager starts working, you know, in that area, that they're equipped to know, you know, who to call when they come up with a certain service that they need. So then when you're, like I said before, we do, you know, majority of like case management, and we do those needs assessments and service plans for our program participants. Once we've done the needs assessment, we develop these goals, and we do update the goals quarterly. You know, what we have found sometimes is like when we're doing goals is the program participant wants to think very, very broad, right? Like they're just like, I'm ready to get into housing. But, you know, that might be more of a multiple step. So we have to kind of like break down our goals. We have to also ensure, kind of going up to that client choice and client empowerment, that those goals are going to fit the need, and it's going to be something that, you know, the program participant wants to do. So we will do ongoing personal support, and that can look like, you know, just checking in with them, you know, via phone. It could be meeting them at their home, or they're coming into our office. Our program participants, the way in which we work with them can really vary. We have some program participants who need, you know, especially in the beginning, kind of checking in or meeting once a week, and might need our services depending on what's going on for up to, you know, 3 years. A lot of times when we work with foreign-born, we do work with them for a lot longer because they're going through the T visa process. And during that time, they really need advocacy within the, you know, immigration legal, and they need housing advocacy. You know, they're not able to always be able to work. So they need that financial assistance while they're going through that process. But we have some people that we work with, and really the only thing that they need is being connected to 1 or 2 services, and then they're good, you know, and they may, you know, have other people that just really need to be kind of have a check-in once a month. So we have to ensure that we are being flexible, you know, our services are not all like, you know, all going to look alike. We have to make sure that it fits what works best for that program participant. We do a lot of different advocacy within, you know, in court, law enforcement, different social service agencies. We assist with like, you know, the applications for benefits. We assist with transportation, you know, if it's needed. And then We ensure that we're keeping accurate, paperwork for the program participants. And then we also have prevention groups. And I know Dr. Hayden was actually just talking about one of them. What the two prevention groups that we have are called My Life, My Choice, and I Am Empowerment. So in My Life, My Choice, it is a 10 sessions for adolescent identifying females, and it can be completed in a variety of places. We started My Life, My Choice, I want to say almost like six years ago as a pilot program. And we started with 3 pilot programs, and now we are doing it like statewide. And actually we are in the process of becoming facilitated trainers, because when you are going to lead a My Life, My Choice group, you can't lead that My Life, My Choice group unless you are trained by the My Life, My Choice facilitators. So we've been working closely with My Life, My Choice to be able to become certified so that we can then provide these trainings to all of those in Kentucky that would like to start groups. And then in each group, what we ensure is that they get a survivor guide. These are the survivor guides from GEMS, and they are really helpful. We have gotten a lot of feedback back from the kids in the group that they really, really enjoy these guides. So the goals of the My Life, My Choice are just to change the attitude of the girls about like commercial sexual industry. Oh, sorry, it skipped. I apologize. I apparently deleted several slides, but it's to change attitude of this, and then to also raise awareness of what CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children, are, but also to increase self-esteem and to identify healthy relationships and understand boundaries within relationships. And then we have what we call the I Am Empowerment program. And this is one that we are doing that is for adolescent identifying males. We, when we were doing My Life, My Choice, what we noticed was that we didn't have this prevention at all for males, and we know that males are trafficked as well, and in some studies show 50%. So we need to be able to meet that need. So we are currently implementing the first of 3 pilot programs of I Am Empowerment, and we are doing that in a residential setting. And the goals of I Am are to understand trafficking and exploitation, to understand peer inclusion and sense of belonging, to enhance self-esteem and self-worth, understand the influence of media, and then understand what violent masculinity is. We are almost done with our 3 pilots, and what the response we've gotten so far has been really positive. So we are really hopeful that we will be able to put this out statewide, just like we have My Life, My Choice. Oh, it got all moved around. Sorry, I moved these around. I apologize. So then that was just My Life, My Choice. Sorry. I do want to mention another thing that we have done that I don't have on these slides is so we really recognize, as the field grows, we're learning so much. Like the field of anti-trafficking is really honestly just in its toddler stages. So the things that we implemented 5 years ago are not all things that we're doing now, and we're learning a great deal. And one of the things that we really recognized was the need for survivor input in our program, right? Like the survivor voices are the most important. So we developed what we are calling the advisory board. We really wanted to be intentional about this, so we worked with people through OVC, the Office of Victims of Crime, and those that had already been doing advisory boards. And it took us about 2 years to put it together, but we're actually now in year 2. And our advisory board is made up of past program participants. And then the first year, what we did was really just kind of working with them on, what it looks like to be on a board, and then providing different types of trainings that they ask for. We are now, halfway into our 2nd year, and the focus is on them informing our program, because that is what's really important. We want to know, does our intake paperwork, is our needs assessment questions, are the is our programming, is it appropriate? Like, what are we getting right, but what are we getting wrong and we need to change? And I'm putting up some of my some of the contact information for all of us here. You see that Marissa and Katie are specific more towards the Lexington area, and then myself and Olivia and Tamar are in the Louisville area. And I really appreciate you all letting me be here to speak. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Amy. Next, we will again hear from Jennifer Beagle, Survivor and Director of Family Support Systems, Safe Support Services, Safe Passage.
Okay, hello again. Good to be here. Do you guys want me to have my camera on or off? Okay, we're going to go with on. All right, if you don't mind putting up my slides, I'll be ready to start as soon as I see those. That will be great. That's a lot of great information that we have been hearing. It is incredible what the state of Kentucky is doing in this for this industry, and I'm definitely humbled to be a part of that mission. At Safe Passage, we're responding to the issues of child trafficking and sexual exploitation. Our mission is to support trafficked, exploited, and at-risk youth through trauma-informed and specialized services that are relevant to overcoming trafficking trauma. We do this through a holistic approach. We help these victims through support services and survivor mentorship. We also know that kids are being abused through trafficking today and every day, and someone must be there to help them. We know that unless someone reaches these kids before predators do, there will be more victims tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. So we use prevention efforts in an attempt to reach kids before any danger does. We provide intervention and support so today's survivors can heal. I think they're pulling up my slides now. They're going to be the last slides of the PowerPoint. We provide intervention and support so today's survivors can heal, and we provide education and awareness to prevent it from happening to another kid tomorrow. We are in this fight to end it. I know it sounds cliche, but that is exactly what we do. Yes, so many of you have heard of the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. The ACE study tells us if we have childhood trauma and do not get help for that trauma, that we are more likely to re-experience similar trauma in our teenage years and even in our adulthood. If we don't get help for this, we end up recycling more and more trauma. So trauma becomes the vicious cycle, and it snowballs into this nightmare that you feel like you're stuck on a hamster wheel and that it keeps spinning and spinning and you can't catch your breath and you cannot find an exit. And you'll see our illustration there. When one person gets stuck on this wheel in the cycle of trauma and that person cannot escape, it becomes a generational issue. We don't want kids to recycle through trauma. We don't want them to have that generational issue. We don't want them to live this nightmare where they cannot break the loop. So as you see here, we use prevention, intervention, and long-term support approaches to break that loop. Prevention blocks kids from taking the on-ramp, and you can see that illustration in that slide. Prevention blocks that kid from taking the on-ramp to trauma in efforts to reach them before abuse ever even takes or even occurs. Our intervention efforts are attempting to be a bridge for kids to take the exit ramp, but where a crisis has already occurred, we step in with our support services. By providing these services over the long term, we hope to see kids become supported, capable, and empowered to totally forge a new pathway in life, one that does not lead them back into trauma, but into hope and resiliency. So this is our approach and our mission. We are working to break that loop of trauma and help kids pave a more hopeful pathway of life. On slide 3, you'll see what Safe Passage is doing. Safe Passage is going on year 3, and I think the running joke is their second year was COVID, so it shouldn't even count, but that is actually when they launched full-time services and opened their doors. Safe Passage is going on year 3, and in this time, we have reached over 4,000 students through prevention program. We've trained over 5,000 professionals to spot the signs of child trafficking. We've educated over 2,000 community members on the issues of child trafficking and exploitation. And we have over 4 years of experience on the local human trafficking task force. Our awareness and our education efforts take a deep dive into modern child trafficking and what it actually looks like. It helps people to understand the current trends, that we are not working with the idea of the Taken movies and the things that Hollywood seems to glorify. It's so much more complex, and we really hit that deeply. Kara is the one who provides that training, and she does it free of cost to your agency. She has trained child welfare workers, courts, juvenile justice, law enforcement, schools, foster care parents, and many more. We'll circle back around to that training option later, but all of this information is also on our website, which you'll see at the end of this presentation. If you don't mind going to slide 4, and I'll talk to you about what I'm more excited about than anything at all for Safe Passage. As the Director of Family Support Services, that's what I want to take a minute to talk to you about. We provide long-term support services to trafficked and at-risk youth. What we saw was trafficked youth being lumped into a standard case plan with youth who had other forms of trauma. And while these kids are receiving excellent case management and counseling, the support totally misfires when it comes to addressing the complex layers of child trafficking. So the services aren't necessarily relevant to overcome that complex trafficking trauma. The second issue we saw was the loss of relationship. Many of these kids have been placed in over 12 to 15 homes and facilities throughout their young lives. They've cycled through all the group homes, mental health institutions, foster care system. And while those programs are excellent, and they are also short term. There comes a day, whether it's 2 weeks or 6 months later from now, that a child has to leave that program. When they reintegrate back home, they not only lose all the support that they had in those programs, they also are reintegrating back into the very same environment that they were running from. We know typically a child doesn't run to something, they are running from something. So when they leave these programs, they're being reintegrated back into the environment that they originally needed support to begin with. We saw that services were lacking not only in relevancy, but that long-term relationship. We have designed, Safe Passage has designed a community-based service to respond to this. While we do other safety planning, we offer safety planning, needs assessment, and trauma-informed evidence-based curriculum. Everything we do is rooted in survivor mentorship and through long-term relationship. These kids get to be encouraged and supported by a survivor of human trafficking and so much more. Like my personal ACE score was a solid 10 out of 10. So as a survivor of so many different things, I'm able to understand and walk them through their experiences, and it gives them that relationship that can continue supporting them no matter where they're placed. When people say to us they don't come across trafficked youth that often, if at all, we ask them, do you come across runaway homeless youth? Because 1 of 3 runaway youth are picked up by a trafficker within 48 hours. Do you come across foster care and the system involved youth? Because over 94% of trafficked youth come from the system. If you come across any of these youth, you are coming across trafficked youth then. The chance of a frontline worker coming across trafficked youth, that statistic is high, but the chances of them recognizing it are pretty low because a lot of people don't understand the depth of what that complex trauma and trafficking looks like. These youth have been labeled. They've been conditioned by our culture to look like the runaway girl that's dating the older men. They're badly behaved teens with zero amount of judgment and no cares in life. We don't have time to dive into that right now, but we want you to know that what people refer to as survivor sex and child pornography are actually commercial sexual exploitation of children. And a lot of people don't understand that. Our key youth are those who are trafficked, those who are exploited, and those who are at risk. Why we say at-risk youth is if a child is showing risky behaviors or red flags, we don't want to wait until the crisis before we step in. We would rather do prevention than intervention. So we will take at-risk youth if they're showing any signs of that behavior. We have developed our curriculum around that as well. Another reason we include at-risk is because trafficking often shows up through counseling much later. Oftentimes, the first issues spotted are running away, toxic relationships, risky behaviors, abuse, and potentially the presence of an older person. The youth goes into counseling for one of these issues, and then it's much later recognized that trafficking is identified. Most victims of human trafficking don't know they're victims. Like myself, I didn't know I was a victim of human trafficking until 10 years ago. And I was already out of the industry for almost 10 years and still didn't know that I was a victim of human trafficking. But if a provider is unsure of if trafficking is present, they're not accustomed to calling us because they don't understand that we work with that at-risk youth. So we can eliminate that iffy area. Yes, we will screen. We use the Vera screening tool, and we will screen where they're at, if they're at risk or if they've been exploited and trafficked, and we will work with that youth. If a youth doesn't have that textbook trafficking case going on, ask yourself, if this kid doesn't get the right intervention today, could they end up being trafficked later? And if that even is just the smallest yes, if that kid appears to be headed in that vulnerable direction, we want to help. If we could go to the next slide. This is our motto. This is our approach: relevancy, relationship, and resiliency. This is where we stand in the gap for trafficked youth. It's hardly a choice if you don't have many options to choose from. So they feel like what they're doing is what they're conditioned to do, what they're told every day that they're going to amount to. This is normal behavior. This is normal life for them. These youth are in full survival mode. They are in fight, flight, and freeze mode. We want to turn that around to relevance, relationship, and resilience. We want to change the perspective of troubled youth, and we want to turn that to vulnerable youth. We have failed our youth today. Regardless what they're doing, they are still children, and we want to work with them and put them on that positive pathway. Everything we do is rooted in survivor mentorship through committed long-term relationships. Kids are losing relationships every time they walk in and out of an institution, every time they walk in and out of the system. They lose their case managers, they lose their therapists, they lose directors, they even lose peers. So we're committed to walking alongside of them for the long-term relationship. If a youth comes to us and is 12 years old, we will walk alongside of them through our mentorship program and through our curriculum we'll walk with them until they're 18, 19 years old, preparing them for college, preparing them for the work industry, and preparing them for that positive future. If I could have the next slide. Thank you. Survivor mentorship. Me too. I get it. I've been there. You are not alone. That is my absolute approach. We are the only organization in Louisville who is providing that long-term survivor-led support services to trafficked and at-risk youth. These kids are coming from all over the communities, foster homes, courts, streets, you fill in the blank. They're coming from that. We recently had a mom say to us, my child has been through every program there is out there. What makes yours different? Well, first, we don't call it a program. We're not a program. We're a mentorship. We're just a mentorship. They are in so many programs already that they don't want to do another program. So we come in through obviously the relevance. I'm relevant to your trauma. I'm relevant to your experiences. I was raised in foster care. I was raised in domestic violence. I was molested at 7. You fill in the blanks. I can identify. I quit school in the 8th grade. I never got an education. I ran away from home time and time again. So we come at it through that relevance, and then we're committed to that long-term relationship. But secondly, we don't make it feel clinical. We are that mentorship program, one survivor to another. We go to parks, we go to zoos, we go out to eat for burgers and ice cream. I promise you, I am never going to be skinny because I'm always taking someone out to eat. And we just break that bread and build that relationship, and they can take their time. They don't have to tell me anything until they are ready and they feel safe. A lot of these kids have so many different placements. They've moved so many different institutions and homes. They've lost so many people across the board. And we just want to be different from that. If you can go to the next slide, that would be great. This is where family support services come into effect also. I'm done. I don't know what to do with her anymore. She's a bad girl. I've got nothing left. Listen, I'm a mom of a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old who have been adopted twice through foster care and have an extensive trauma background. I understand, Mama. I understand. So let's just look into that perspective. Parents are super discouraged. They're tired. They are done. They don't know what else to do. Kids are running away from home every week. So we step into the situation at hand and we encourage the parents. Excuse me. We put education into everything that we do. We help them understand the adverse childhood experiences and how we can come alongside each other for them to help their child heal and succeed, and so can they. We provide the family support services because the family needs support as well. We can work on the child, but again, they are going back into those same environments. So we do the whole family, and we have workshops for the guardians, foster parents, and parents as well. These kids are seemingly out of control, and parents are so exhausted, they're pulling their hair out. They're hurt, they're angry, they're scared, they're hopeless. So the whole family needs to be supported, because only when the whole family is on board will we have hope for this child to have a successful future. When the kids come home, it's just a screaming match. We want to diffuse that quickly. The parents don't understand why the kid has run away again and again and again to be with her pimp, excuse me, to be with her boyfriend. They don't even understand that he is a pimp. She says he's a boyfriend. They think he's a boyfriend. They don't understand. We're here to help you understand. They don't see that she is has a real emotional attachment to this guy. So we help that family process the layers of trauma, trauma bonding and manipulation. We encourage them not to give up on their child. And you can go ahead and go through slide 8 and go straight to 9 if you don't mind. Okay, so here's a biggie. People don't think that Kentucky has a problem concerning child trafficking. Not many people are getting kidnapped. Not, you know, my child, my neighbor, no one's getting kidnapped. They don't see it. They watch these videos on YouTube. They watch these videos on social media, and it's not happening in their neighborhood, especially Kentucky, who is just full of good old country people, and it never happens here. That could not be more wrong. Here's what Kara, the founder of Safe Passage, has to say about what happens in Kentucky. Kentucky is #1 for child abuse and neglect. We have over 10,000 children in the child welfare and foster care system, and we rank among the top 10 worst states for opioid and drug use. All of these factors are interrelated when it comes to child trafficking. You cannot tell me we have spiking record high risk factors on a national scale, but that we do not have child trafficking problem. Folks, we have a child trafficking problem. Kentucky has a running history of child abuse, neglect, homeless youth, runaways, and the LGBTQ youth who are being disowned from their family just simply because of their choices. Accordingly, the system's involvement is inevitable, and the juvenile justice department and child welfare system has to kick in. There are no other options. There's so much I could say about that, but obviously we don't have the time today. So if you want to learn more, and you can go to that last slide, please, slide number 10. If you want to learn more, there is our website, and you can contact us through that website. It has 100% of our contact, emails, phone numbers, everything on there. Bottom line, it takes a whole community to address this issue and make a difference. We are only part of this community. Safe Passage is only part of the picture. It really does take a village, which is why we really appreciate all of our community partners like you. If you would like to know more about our team and how you too can make a difference, though, if you're just wanting to know how you can be involved, go to our website and sign up for our lunch and learns. We have them every single month. We will feed you good, and we will tell you all the things that we weren't able to say on this particular phone call. So be our guest so we can fully update and educate you on the signs, effects, and healing process of trafficking trauma. And I'm going to close with this one thing. When I was a child, I wish deeply there would have been a gateway for my safety like Safe Passage instead of the gateway that led me to a lifestyle that no child or even adult should ever have to endure. So I'm grateful to be a part of this anti-trafficking call, and I'm grateful to partner with Safe Passage and with all of you where we are making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our last speaker could not be here with us tonight, but we still wanted to share their information with you. Free to Hope takes a proactive approach to disrupt and prevent human trafficking and other sex crimes against adults and children through education, equipping community responsiveness, and enabling a victim-centered and trauma-informed safe place for survivors. They have a women's drop-in center for female victims of domestic violence, sex crimes, including human trafficking, to get help with basic needs, such as finding local services, life skill classes, job opportunities, and providing a supportive environment for people to heal from traumatic experiences. They provide programs that help to equip local businesses and the communities to address and prevent human trafficking in their areas, and provide education to community, increasing awareness related to the occurrence of human trafficking in Kentucky, the United States, and globally. To learn more about Free to Hope, contact their founder and director, Amy Lenertz, and visit their website.
Let's give all of our presenters a round of applause. Feel free to use the emoji, the applause emoji in the emoji bar. At this time, we will have our Q&A. Please put your questions in the chat. We may not be able to get to answer all of your questions this evening, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. You can also contact any of our speakers for more information. First, we will start with some questions that were already submitted from the audience. So any of the speakers can jump in and answer the questions. The first question is, what is the biggest myth concerning human trafficking?
You know, I think that we see a lot of myths going on right now in the media, social media, in regards to human trafficking. We, saw it this summer with, Wayfair and having the children in the in those storage units. And I think, that these myths really do harm actual survivors and what's going on. And, one of the biggest myths that I see is that, trafficking only happens to a specific population. And whereas we do have populations that are more at risk for trafficking, trafficking can be happening anywhere. And trafficking is happening to those that, are from the United States.
This is Teena, and I just wanted to highlight the Kentucky human trafficking brochure, in which we have several myths and facts listed in here, and I'll just give you one of them. Myth: if a victim is under age 18, it is trafficking, but if they're over 18, it's their choice. The fact is, if there is ever force, fraud, or coercion involved, it's not a choice, it's human trafficking. Another myth was trafficking only happens at major sporting events. But we all know that the fact is that trafficking occurs every day in every county in Kentucky. It is not limited to Kentucky Derby or other large events. The demand for commercial sex and labor exploitation are daily realities.
Thank you for answering.
So the second question that we have on the list, myth concerning human trafficking. Oh, did I read the? Oh, I'm sorry. What I meant to say was, how prevalent is this issue in the Metro Louisville area / community?
I think that we all know that the numbers don't really jive with what is probably really happening. There is a lot that we don't know about. There's a lot being investigated. Sometimes finding one situation leads to finding more, to finding rings, to finding that there a transportation route going through. So there's a lot more activity than we're able to put the numbers to.
The next question, so what are some of the gaps that you see between survivors and service providers that the community could help with?
This is Teena. I'd just like to say that outstanding groups have spoken today and are doing fabulous work, each and every one of them. And I think we're so much progress has been made over the past few years, and so much effort. The training too of police officers, of state troopers, of so many people. That and more everyday people are learning about human trafficking as well.
I will say that, one of the the large gaps we see is just still really that need for housing and different types of housing. So there's a need for emergency type housing, there's a need for more transitional housing, and there's a need for more long-term housing. I know that that is something that those that we work with, really, that is a high need that they have, and it can take a lot to get connected to those types of services, and can take a really long time to get connected to those services. And, you know, without stable housing, you are not always able to find stability in other areas of your life. I will say that, you know, where there are gaps, I think that what we need to recognize is that there are so many different community service providers that can provide types of services for trafficking survivors. I think that there is a thought process that if somebody is being trafficked or had been trafficked, that they only need trafficking specific services. And, you know, they may not want to be focused on their trafficking at that point, and they have other things that they want to focus on, or they may need a myriad of services. So it's really important for, I think, community service providers to understand that they may already be seeing you know, people that have been trafficked, and that they can provide those services. So it doesn't, you know, the program doesn't always have to be trafficking specific like our, you know, my program.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is, what does human trafficking look like on Kentucky's college campuses and in high schools? What are the warning signs and what are the risk factors that we can look for?
I think Dr. Hayden may want to comment on that.
Dr. Hayden, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. It's the same as in the community. There's always someone who wants to dominate and prey on someone who's vulnerable, and they seem to know how to find them. So as far as on campuses and high schools, I mean, that's what we've talked about tonight, of the young people who can easily be taken advantage of and manipulated into this in some way.
So the next question actually comes from the chat. Are there programs or watch groups specifically targeted at trafficking through trucking?
What were the last words? Trafficking through what?
Trucking.
Oh.
Well, there's an organization, Truckers Against Trafficking, and they work very hard at eliminating this at truck stops and places because they know it is a real problem.
They're quite fabulous, and they have quite a few sponsors, big sponsors, and they do a tremendous amount of good work.
I believe they even put flyers in all the bathrooms at major truck stops and gas stations. Like, they're very proactive to help people get out of trafficking and to educate. I mean, it's an education on a sheet when you're using the restroom traveling, so it's really good.
Thank you all. The next question is, are there services specifically for teenagers?
So,
Yeah.
you know, it was mentioned this evening, Safe Passages has services specific, you know, to teenagers. The prevention programs I mentioned earlier specific to teenagers, but anybody that's been identified to have been trafficked, you know, whether a teen or adult, there are services out there. And it's, you know, again, it's going to reflect on the individual and what it is that the individual may need. But there are, you know, a myriad of different types of services that can, or providers that can, you know, provide those services.
There are a couple. I'm sorry, Teena, go ahead.
I'd like to give a shout out for the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, because that agency, they are trained operators who are answering the calls, and those calls are dispatched within 30 minutes to the Attorney General's office here in Kentucky. And I believe, Amy, that you said that Catholic Charities also gets a notice, but they have access at that number to many agencies to contact, and so they can dispatch right away to get a person help. So that is a good starting point.
I think we have about one more time. Let me get my thought out. We have time for about one more question. So this last question is, how has COVID affected human trafficking prevention?
I mean, honestly, you know, just give from our perspective, it's had to change the way, you know, we do it. You know, it went from doing in-person prevention groups and awareness and outreach to doing all virtually, and really working on, like, how do we ensure that when we're doing it virtually, that they're, you know, the kids that we're working with are getting that impact, you know, because there is something to be said for being in person versus, you know, on a computer. But I think, you know, overall it's gone really well. And I think nationwide, the anti-trafficking field is building up those responses, because we don't know, you know, how long this, you know, could go on where we need to have more of these virtual type things. So everybody's really stepping up, because we want to, you know, everybody wants to make sure that that impact still occurs.
Well, thank you again for answering our questions. I'm going to let Kendra take over, and she has a few words to say.
The Human Trafficking Awareness Conference Committee has a call to action for the audience every year. First, take out your phone, say the Human Trafficking Hotline number, 1-888-3737-888. This will be the first step for some of you towards ending human trafficking. We implore you to build onto your toolkit, attending other conferences, trainings, volunteer, and educate others. Request trainings for your schools, places of worship, or places of employment. We have several community partners, including those who presented today, offering these opportunities. Ask questions, speak out, and bring it to light. We would like to thank everyone who has made this event possible. Conference hosts, U of L Women's Center, and Women for Women Student Board, with special thanks to Jamaica Jones for helping us put this program on each year. A huge thank you to our awesome volunteers, Grace Welsh, Beverly Granger, and myself. Finally, I thank all of you for joining us tonight. We hope it has been informative, engaging, and inspiring. We encourage you to fill out the evaluation that will be sent out later this week to give us suggestions for future conferences, or if you have any questions we could pass on to our presenters. We appreciate you for your support of our conference and hope to receive your continued support for many years to come. Jamaica Jones has some upcoming events to share before we take our group photo.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Had a long night, but I hope you guys got a lot of wealth of information. But if you want to stay up to date with some upcoming events the Women's Center has going on March 13th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., we will have our 15th annual Kentucky Women's Book Festival, and tickets are still available for that. And next week, registration will open up for our 4th annual Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in STEM. We have some phenomenal speakers for that as well. So if you are comfortable, please do turn on your cameras and we'll take a group photo to commemorate you being here and taking that first step of taking action against human trafficking. So we'll give people some time to turn on their cameras. So I'll put us in a classroom, seeing since we can't be in the auditorium on campus, this is as close as we're going to be able to get. So we get everyone's faces. So when I will take 2 photos, because I know the reality, sometimes someone's eyes are closed and craziness. So if you want to have your camera on, just give you 1 more second to do so. We'll get ready to take this group photo. All right, you guys ready? All right, 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna take 1 more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And so if you don't mind, put in the chat, what are some of your call to actions that you guys are gonna take away today? What are some things you got from this conference that you learned? And these are things that we will share out some of your all's call to actions on social media that our attendees will be doing after attending our conference today. So everyone, please be safe. Be well. We are definitely looking forward to having you guys join us next year. I'm hoping in person at our Human Trafficking Awareness Conference, where we can definitely have more people joining us than the small number we were able to tonight. But if you have any additional questions, please do put it in the chat. We will be sending these to our speakers to see if we can get some of these answered as well, because you had so many great questions. But have a safe evening. Put your call to actions in the chat, and thank you for attending tonight.